In this section, we will continue our discussion about functions. In particular, we are going to look at equations as relations, and then we will look at how those equations can represent functions. So first off, an equation of two variables describes a relationship between those two variables. So it's simply a relation. Whenever we see an equation that involves x and y, it can be helpful to determine if that equation represents y as a function of x. When that happens, x is the independent variable and y is the dependent variable. X is the input, y is the output. The value of y depends upon the value of x. So suppose we have an equation in front of us that involves x and y. How do we know if y is a function of x? If, whenever you look at the equation, the input x is only assigned to one output. So let's take a look at an example. Here we have an equation that involves x and y. The question is, does y represent a function of x? To determine that, let's go ahead and isolate y. We will solve for y. So y squared equals 3 minus 4x. Now to isolate y, we need to take the square root of both sides. So remember, your square root principle says that whenever we take the square root of both sides, y will equal positive or negative square root of 3 minus 4x. So the question now is, if we have an input, how many outputs could that potentially go to? So here, notice that if I substitute a value in for x, I'll have plus or minus the square root of that. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at an example. What happens if x equals 0? If x equals 0, then what's that imply? Y would equal positive or negative square root of 3 minus 4 times 0. It would just be 3. So y would equal positive or negative square root of 3. So notice one input, how many outputs? We have positive square root of 3 and negative square root of 3. So we have two outputs for that single input. So therefore, y is not a function of x. Let's take a look at another example. Again, let's isolate y. So 2y would equal the square root of x plus 6. Divide everything by 2. We would have y equals 1/2 absolute value of x plus 3. Now imagine you're going to put in an x value. If I take the absolute value of that input, there's only going to be one output. Now multiply that by 1/2. Again, only one output. Add 3. Again, there's only one output. So if I substitute a value of x in, there will only ever be one output. So therefore, y is a function of x.